me about the trip from Oregon to the United States.
Oh, well, that's a pretty good story. The way it happened, our family here, most of my mother's family was already here. They came here about, the turn of the century. And my father, some of my father's family had already immigrated here also. So when my father died, they all got together and decided that it would be best for my mother to come, to the United States. So they got together and they raised the necessary amount of money and they got the necessary papers and they sent us. And before long, we were on our way. Today, if you come to the United States, you probably drive to the nearest airport and in a day or two you're here. But uh, that was before Lindbergh, before Amelia Earhart. There was no passenger flight that time, so we had to travel by train. And I remember this was a great experience for me because in Bryan, for one thing, we had no electricity. We hadn't reached that point yet. We had no running water in the houses or anything like that.
Hmm.
And so at the age of 12, when we left, I was 12 at the time. That was the first time I ever saw a train. That was the first time I ever saw an airplane. It was a Piper Cub I saw. Eventually, we got to Hamburg, from where our ship was to sail. And in Hamburg, we had to stay for a whole month before we could board our ship. We
Where
were
did you
stayed in
stay?
an immigrant camp. That's where you got those papers, from that. Remember you
Oh, okay.
in Hamburg,
The Hamburg American.
the
Yeah.
Hamburg American line.
Right.
But the thing that happened after that, when we came to New York, the procedure at that time was immigrants were taken to Ellis Island for processing, and in a day or two they were let go. But when it came our turn, we were refused entry. Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
We stayed in Ellis Island for 10 days before they let us in. The reason for it is that here was my mother with four small children, and they were afraid that she might become a public charge. At that time, we were pretty strict, about it. They didn't allow that. In the daytime, when we came out, that great hall of the Ellis Island had one side that was almost all window, from top to bottom, and all across, looking out on the New York skyline. And I remember one time my mother standing there, and I was standing alongside her, and my mother saying to me, "We'll never get there now." She didn't expect to be able to get back, get in here. And I was thinking, after all this effort, all was for nothing. It was a long trip. We totally uprooted ourselves with the previous life, and now, it seemed like we wouldn't, we had to go back to nothing. So what my family did, my mother's youngest brother, who had come here earlier, who had come here earlier, was 19 years old when the First World War broke out. And he was drafted into the American Army. And he was sent overseas with the American Expeditionary Force under General Pershing.
Hmm.
And he was killed in France. They gave each soldier a, a life policy, what do you call it?
Life insurance.
Life insurance. Each soldier had a $10,000 life insurance. So when he was killed in France, by the way, he was killed on the 10th of November, the day before the armistice. So what they did was take that $10,000 insurance that they still had and put it up to security that my mother will not become a public charge. And in those days, in 1923, that was the year 1923, $10,000 was an awful lot of money now. A cup of coffee was 5 cents. A loaf of bread was 8 cents. You could buy the New York Times Daily Edition for 2 cents and the Sunday edition for 10 cents. So you could go on the New York subway for 5 cents at the time. So $10,000 was a lot of money, enough to convince the immigration authorities that my mother will be, will not depend on public assistance. So that's when they let us out.